Get strong.
All right, we're live.
We're live, mate. Alrighty, everyone. Thanks once again for tuning in to Real Talks with Rish. I know I've had a bit of a break before, but we're finally back with a new episode after I think a 2 or 3 week break. And look, this one has come at a perfect time because we've had a very close friend of mine. Over the years, went to high school together, and he's actually in town in Canberra back home for the week. And yeah, of course, had to have him on the pod. So welcome back, Tom.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here on the podcast.
That's it, mate. That's it. So let's jump straight into it, mate. Look, we've known each other for over years, and shout out to Eric as well for letting us use his amazing house over here. Um, you know, I guess we'll just sort of start off with, man. What was your sort of background, I guess, growing up? Obviously we knew each other, during high school. But I guess sort of maybe before that, like just talk to us a little bit about like your childhood and how you sort of grew up, whether that was in Canberra or outside.
Yeah. All right. So I grew up in North Canberra. I think I was in Palmerston until I was about 5 and then moved over to Nichols. I went to Palmerston Primary School. Then went to Bergman. Obviously, that's where I met you along the way. Um, Apart from that, did a lot of sport. AFL was my main sport that I liked to play as a main hobby.
Yeah.
Just love life. We had a pool, had a pet cat.
Yeah, you did too. You did too over in North Canberra. That's pretty cool, man. So and then obviously Eric as well. He was part of our friends group as well. Growing up and I played a bit of Aussie rules myself. Wasn't that great at it. But I had a little bit of a stint over at the what do you call it, Gungahlin Jets, I think it was
Yeah.
called. Yeah, yeah. Back in the early years. So no, that's really interesting, man. Um, and then I guess sort of just take us through how was it like growing up in Canberra? Like, did you sort of feel that you were, I guess, set on like one sort of friends group, or like did you sort of drift off to different friends groups and like found your way through life? Like, what sort of were the influential points for you? I guess growing up and then sort of becoming the person who you are.
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting question. I don't think I really changed friends too much throughout school. I kind of stayed with the friends I was with mostly, and I still keep in contact with, whoever you can because it's impossible to keep in contact with everyone. Um, but I always had this feeling that I was going to leave Canberra and we'll leave Australia for that matter. Um, and that's kind of I've done a few things. Obviously, I've met a lot of new amazing friends outside of Canberra in other places all over the world in Australia as well. But um, it's also meant that like it's put into perspective what my friends are like in Canberra, like my first friends. And I think there's something about that that's quite special.
Yeah, interesting. And you touched on a few elements there, man. Like one of the things you touched on was the fact that you moved away out of Australia, right, for a period of time. And we'll touch on that a little bit later about the experiences you went there, because it's not all sunshine and roses, as I'm sure you'll explain a bit later.
Oh yes.
And then yeah, obviously you move up to Brizzy, right, for work and what you're doing now. So yeah, no, I think that's pretty interesting as well, man, because like myself, you Eric, and Anthony back in the day, right? We probably don't keep in contact with him that much now, but wish he's doing well in whatever he's doing. But you boys were certainly, I guess, the closest people I think I found in Bergman specifically.
The wolf pack.
The Wolfpack, yeah, that's it, mate. Yeah, we call ourselves that stupid name. Oh, I wouldn't say stupid, but yeah, we have a bit of a name going to just Eric in the background, just sigh of like, what the fuck, what was that time? But no, that was a very interesting time for sure. And I do remember back in year 10 4, we were all planning to go as one group, and then obviously one person got swayed away, and then eventually everyone else was like, look, we're going to go with other people, and then that just sort of left me. But anyway, that's a different story. That's those were good times, man, for sure. But yeah, so we'll relate that more back to so your experiences, I guess, going through high school and then obviously through college. and then working in the field that you're doing now. Um, so how like what sort of made you decide to go towards the career path that you're choosing now, which is obviously nursing, which you can articulate a bit more on.
Yeah, so I finished school and I was pretty sick of school by the end of it. I didn't want to look at another book or,
Yeah.
screen or do any kind of work. So I was definitely going to have some time off. The option to do a gap year was always what I was thinking about from, year 11 and 12. I'd always take a year off. So yeah, I took a gap year. I went and worked at a summer camp in America for a few months, and that was amazing. And then that gap year kind of turned into 3 gap years, and I went over to UK and Europe um, for 18 months and just lived and worked around there and travelled around a bit, which was really fun. And then, yeah, coming to the end of my third year out of school, and I still didn't really know too much about what I wanted to do. I was leaning towards healthcare, like I always usually was, but before it was more something like exercise science. But now I was looking for something that was a bit more, just something a bit more real, um, and a bit more varied.
Mm,
And nursing's one of those roles that, I mean, bedside nurse is obviously the most common and it's what everyone thinks of, but nursing is really so much more, and there's almost infinite different roles for nurses now these days, and it gets a bit um, hectic knowing what to do. So yeah, I just kind of wanted something that would be varied, so that's why I went into nursing because I knew I'd eventually find something that I'd really like doing, and um, if I could always keep moving around
yeah.
without too much trouble.
No, 100%, mate. And we're all still young, in our early 20s, and I think we're sort of coming to that point where we're really trying to find out what we actually want to do in life. Like I didn't even know I wanted to work in cybersecurity. Ironically, doing a degree in commerce, right, had nothing to do with IT. It sort of, I guess, sort of just ended up here if you want. But now I'm actually really enjoying what I'm doing. So I think that was really interesting where you touched on doing nursing, and I think the premise of nursing as well, because my ex girlfriend as well. She is a nurse, and she was also telling me that the I feel like the big personality of nurses, or their attitude is they're very caring and very nurturing. Like they want to help people out. So I think was that sort of a big influence of like why you wanted to go into that sort of line of work.
Um, yeah, obviously a big part of it for a lot of people to get into it is, they love people and they love caring for people. They're quite, emotional and empathetic nurses are. That was definitely part of it. It was, for me, that I'm getting more out of that than I would be doing something else like a trade or,
Yeah,
um, any kind of office or desk work for me personally.
yeah,
Um, But it is interesting you say that with nurses because a lot of the time you can only be so loving and so caring, I think. And especially we saw this a lot with COVID is the high amount of burnout and compassion fatigue among nurses where,
yeah. That would
you
have been
can
a
only
tough
give
period.
so much.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure. I think you were working during that 2020 period. You might be studying, right? I'm not sure, but yeah, as you said, that whole 2020 2021 period was just an overhaul of people coming in, right, with COVID symptoms or whatever, and the shortage of nurses, I guess, right around the country was quite a disparate number there. And yeah, credit goes out to all the frontline workers out there, because I obviously do believe like, and as they should be getting paid, more than what they are at the moment compared to maybe some of the other professions out there. But yeah, so you touched on a few key elements there of why you chose nursing as opposed to going down, I guess, other career routes. Um, how has your time away from Canberra, I guess, being in sort of rural Queensland, which is where you are now, how has that sort of shifted your dynamic or your mindset towards, just working in a new environment, and what were those sort of experiences like?
Yep. Okay. So, yeah, when I finished my 3 gap years, I did my first year of uni in 2020 when lockdown and all that happened. So I was in Canberra for that year. And then the following 2 years, so the last 2 years of my degree, I was in Brisbane for. And then after graduating at the end of last year, I got my first nurse graduate job out in Western Queensland. So compared to my student placements in the larger metro hospitals, um, my experience in the rural hospital was quite different. So instead of just being kind of keyholed into one specific area like cardiac nursing or surgical nursing or medical, you're kind of at the hospital and you just have to deal with whatever patient comes in. So, on the ward, we could have one mental health patient, we could have one cardiac patient, we could have one falls patient. Um, and you just kind of need to know a little bit about everything,
Yeah.
which is like really good for starting because I get to learn quite a lot of different areas. Like I get to experience a bit of emergency, I get to experience a bit of medical, I get to experience mental health. I get to do some outpatient work and some telehealth nursing as well. So I'm really grateful that I'm experiencing all these different areas, and it's helping me decide where I want to go to next. Um, where the next, I guess, path is for me.
Yeah, interesting. And I think one of the things you clearly articulated there was working in a rural area, right? Maybe, I guess, if you work in a city area or, Canberra, Brisbane, or one of those areas where there's a lot of commute and a lot of population, you probably do get that luxury of specializing in, I guess, a particular area when you start out. But I guess one of the risks and one of the rewards as well you take from going rural is you have to sort of deal with all those things all in once. And as you said, you sort of just got to get on with the job with whichever patient you get, which means that you learn a lot in a short amount of time, right? And I think that from a learning perspective, you would have gained a lot of experience out of that. And it also looks really good on the resume, right, as well. So, like, as you continue doing your placements, as you continue going on with life, that those sort of experiences really hone in, right? So yeah, no, that's really great, man. Sort of touching back on, I guess, my sort of career trajectory, because I didn't really because yeah, I didn't take a gap year like you and Eric did, right? Which I sort of look back now where I was like, maybe I should have done that, and just sort of taking that time off away from year 12, because I sort of finished year 12, then the year after 2017 went straight into uni, and then finished uni at around 2020, I think it was, and then was pretty lucky enough to get a grad job, if that's what you want to call it. And then, yeah, just sort of went on from there. But I think one of the things that I do regret is probably not just it's probably, yeah, taking a year off just to really reflect on what I wanted to do. Because when I did do like sort of a mini gap year where
Mm.
when I graduated end of 2019, I think I already told you this, but I went with my mate Pat. We went to China, Thailand. From that was ironically right before COVID as well. I was in Shanghai. Um,
Did you go to Wuhan?
no, I didn't.
See the wet markets?
Thankfully, didn't go to Wuhan. But yeah, I was just in Shanghai and then went to Thailand on the way back. And then was in Canberra for a bit, but then I had another month pretty much in Canberra before I started the gig. So then I was like to my other mate, I'm like, dude, like let's just go to Bali. And he's like,
Mm.
yeah, right, like let's run it. So then we went to Bali for like 3 weeks, and then yeah, had a mad time there, and then yeah, came back, and then yeah, it's just straight onto the job after that. But yeah, I think that point of reflection where you do take that year off, and as you said, you went to Europe and you had some really, amazing experiences, I'm sure. Um, everyone should do that for sure, as opposed to just, I guess, going if I wouldn't even call it traditional pathway, but just going the straight out of school to uni. Because I think a lot of like younger people to us, right, that are going through year 11 and year 12, like, I'm sure you have cousins and family that are going through that experience as like myself. And one thing I always tell them is like, don't stress too much on like what your ATAR is, because I'll be honest, dude, like I got a really bad ATAR. Like I would say I had five, but I don't know. I just think the college system just wasn't for me, to be honest.
The Hawker Premium Plus package.
Yeah, that's that's it. Yeah. But no, Hawk was actually great. On another note, but yeah, no, I just, yeah, compared to what I guess I wanted to, or where I wanted to get, I definitely was nowhere near that. But then again, like afterwards, after time moves on, you realize that ATAR doesn't actually define like what you do and like where you want to go. So, yeah, no, that's pretty interesting, man. So we'll move on to like the next aspect of the podcast, which it delves into sort of relationships a little bit. And when I say relationships, I don't necessarily mean, if you have a girlfriend, over the years or whatever. It's just more relationships with people, and how you and your mindset have sort of kept in your head, like how can you maintain a relationship with a person over time? Because one thing I noticed from you, man, as well in the early years is you were very good at sort of being good with everyone at school. Like, you didn't really have anyone that disliked you or didn't have anyone that sort of like despaired you or anything. You were just sort of that person that everyone just got along with. So, yeah, like how did that sort of come about, and how do you practice that now?
Yeah, okay. So obviously, relationships interpersonally is something that's really important to me. Um, and I know you mentioned everyone kind of liking me at school, but I'd be lying if I said honestly some of that did come from an insecurity on my part about wanting to be liked really badly by everyone. You know, never having any enemies, not having anyone speak badly of me. I think that was a big fear and insecurity of me when I was in school. Um, but yeah, in terms of obviously is 1 year out of school, 2 years out of school. Now suddenly it's 6, 7 years out of school. It's like where did the time go? And if you're
Mm,
not careful, you go years without talking to someone who you were once really close with. And I guess that's kind of the reality of it because
yeah,
we
it
had
is.
what 120 people in our cohort at school,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
and if you're going to catch up with 3 people a week, you know what I mean? How it's just going to be impossible to see everyone
Mm,
and keep contact with everyone. Obviously, that's where social media comes in. You can just see what they're up to on their Instagram or on their stories and
sure.
stuff. But it really takes an effort if you want to maintain a relationship with someone because everyone's very busy in their own worlds, especially if you're sitting around waiting for someone to reach out to you and be like, oh, if they
Yeah,
cared,
yeah,
they would reach out. Like that can't be true because guaranteed there's some people that you should be reaching out to that you're not at the same time.
yeah. No, no, 100%, 100%. Yeah, that's pretty deep actually, man. I think yeah, as you sort of rightly said, one of your I guess vulnerabilities back then, as you just said now, was just being liked by everyone, right? Um, yeah, I guess for me it was more like I talked about this in the other episodes, but I was I call myself like a drifter, which is just like you drift from different friends groups like
Ah,
over the period of time. So
yeah,
like with the real popular kids,
yeah.
then hanging out with the nerds, then hanging out with like I don't know like other people, right? But I think that's just sort of made me who I am today. Like I've always been good at talking to people or really like just having a little bit of that extroverted personality where I can just sort of have a conversation with anyone really. It doesn't really need to be someone that I know particularly. So I think that sort of really, I believe, sort of forms your personality in a way, the people that you grow up with, right? And then you share experiences, like yourself, me, Eric. We shared some really nice experiences, through high school, and then over the years, we're still really close friends, which is good. And yeah, you're right. We said you probably only keep in contact with 3 people out of the 150 in our case, because that's certainly true for me. Like back in high school, as I said, like the only people I really keep in contact with is like yourself, Eric, and then Taruna, and that's about it. Like that, and there's no one really beside that. So you do touch on a couple of good points there. Um, has that impacted your personal life, I guess, to a degree? And sort of what I mean by that, like how has that sort of like that mindset of you just trying to be like with everyone, has that had a hindrance on situations in life, or it's been pretty smooth?
Well, it's something that I think everyone learns at some point is regardless of how you behave and doing as much as you can to get everyone to like you, not everyone's going to like you.
Yeah,
And like, I mean, you can hear that, but I think everyone understands that at some point, and it's just a part, I think, of maturing, growing up. Um, that yeah, you're just not going to get along with everyone you meet, and that's okay.
yeah, 100%.
Um, but one thing I think that became evident to me when I started traveling, right, is like you start meeting new people, um, and then you meet someone, you talk to them, you get to know them, you tell them your story, you hear their story. You do this. I mean, when I was traveling, I was meeting people, new people every week, every day. Every new place I went to, I had to kind of start again, and it felt like social exhaustion, like
Yeah,
like
I can imagine.
running a marathon, but meeting people. You know what I mean?
Do so much.
You can only tell your story to people so many times before you're just kind of exhausted.
Yeah,
And after traveling for 18 months overseas, I was so ready to come home. It took a
yeah,
lot of effort to keep meeting new people compared to the start when I was so excited and I was talking to everyone around me. I kind of just became less interested and withdrawn, and I was ready to go home. But even when I came home back to Canberra, that was great. I've got all those old friendships there. Then I moved again to Brisbane,
Mm,
moved from
mm.
Brisbane out to where I'm now in Western Queensland. Um,
Yeah,
it's something I've had to learn how to deal with. I guess how to manage feelings of apathy and exhaustion when it comes to meeting new people. Because I've found that the better I manage that, the better friends I make and the better relationships I have with these people. Um, and talking more about having people like you, the easiest way is to want to get to know them and take a keen interest in who they are,
yeah,
which I think everyone respects that.
yeah. No, no, that's pretty interesting, man. And I definitely agree with you there. Especially, it would have been hard, especially when you're traveling like for 18 months, and you think that you're pretty close with someone, but then you got to realize that nah, I got to go to another country like the next day, right? Then it's just like meeting those people all over again. But I think that's also a journey in itself, right? Like I remember when I was in New Zealand back in December, just as a solo traveler, I just loved having that feeling of just not knowing where to go and just sort of going to a random pub or random bar or whatever, and just sort of you have to make that effort to just get to know someone. And I sort of like that challenge, and it was great. Like I met some backpackers out there, like in Auckland, which was pretty sick. And then we went out to some clubs and had a good time there. But yeah, no, I definitely get the point where if you're overseas, especially for a long period of time, and you're always moving, it can get quite difficult for sure.
Um, One thing you mentioned earlier that you said was that you kind of regretted not taking a gap year, but then you told me about the traveling you went on. And if you think about the reasons why it'd be important to take a gap year, to go see new places, to explore, and to learn how to, make those connections. Like, how do you walk into a pub where you don't know anyone and sit down and make friends? Like, I feel like that's kind of the point of having a gap year. And it sounds like you experienced all those things in the traveling that you have done, whether that was recently or
Yeah.
in that first kind of mini gap year you said you had. So, in terms of regretting, what would you say you're regretting about not going on a gap year?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. I think well, the key element I think for not going on a gap year for me was, I guess, having the freedom to just be out there by myself and just go out and explore new places. Because I feel like one of the biggest decisions why I didn't go there was I thought the risk was too high for me to go to a country at that time and just go like independently for a period of time. I just wasn't ready for that. And I think that's what was the biggest thing that sort of held me back from doing it, if that sort of makes sense. But your second point, where you touched on, where you sort of said it seems like you found how to mingle with people, how to socialize. That was partly due to my mate that I went with, Pat. Like he's always been a traveler, so
Yeah.
he like sort of took the lead of like saying, "Look, Rish, this is the activities we'll do in
Yeah.
Thailand." We had someone we knew in Shanghai. It was his family friend actually, who
Mm.
I'm not even joking. He's like a millionaire. I think I told you the story, yeah. And he literally, we rocked up to Shanghai airport, and he literally got one of his drivers to pick us up in like his Ferrari, and
Yeah.
his driver couldn't really speak English, right? So like we were having a bit of issues whether we were the right people or not. And then Pat just like puts out his phone. He's like Rishi and Pat, and he's like, yeah, yeah, come with me. So we just go put our bags down, and then we just pull up into this Ferrari. We're like, where are we? Like, what the heck's going on? And then he goes, drops us to the hotel, and then for those 5 days, he made sure like we were looked after to the dot. Man, I've never had like a service like that ever. So it was an actual movie. Like during those 5 days, like eating at like five-star restaurants, like just stuff you see in the movies, man. So that was an experience on its own. But then on the flip side, I went to Thailand, right? Which it was more like we got to
Yeah.
immerse ourselves in the culture, see how the locals do things.
Yeah.
And that was a really cool experience in its way. So I was pretty grateful at that time to sort of experience two spectrums of traveling, I guess, if that sort of makes sense. Um, but yeah, I think that sort of answers your question, hopefully, if that does.
Yeah. Yeah. So you did get to learn those skills, and it was good for you. You said having a friend there as well. Um, I found, traveling with a friend is easier in some ways and harder in some ways.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
what are the harder parts of that,
I
do you reckon?
travelled a lot with my brother,
Yeah.
and we're probably the closest people in the world in terms of, you know, my brother's my best friend, but we were still at each other's necks the whole time, just over little shit.
Yeah,
And
right.
I
Okay.
found just when I was on my own, I wasn't compromising what I wanted to do with people.
Mm.
And if I wanted to talk to someone, I had to meet a new friend. Whereas
Yeah,
when I was
right.
with Jesse, I could talk to Jesse. Obviously, we were great at meeting people together,
Yeah, yeah,
but
sure.
it just added that extra element. It's an extra layer of security,
Yeah.
um, but it is an extra layer of making compromises.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fair, man. So now let's sort of move on from that because we touched a lot on, I guess, the element of just sort of, even if you want to, the cliche saying, finding yourself, right? Like during that experience of traveling. So we touched on a couple of critical points there. The one thing that I want to get your gauge on is something that's pretty close to me. And look, I don't. It's something relatively new that I'm doing, but that's just sort of being more content or just more sort of humble with where I'm at and like what I have. And the thing that sort of taught me that is like my religion, Hinduism, which obviously my parents they practice Hinduism. We do all the gatherings and all the rituals and that. But I've never taken it seriously, right? Like I was always just doing it because they were doing it. But now one thing I realized is just especially through mum, who I'm really close with as well, she sort of instilled like she told me this like pretty a while ago, saying that look, Rishi, you'll know when you're ready to just go out and believe in what you want. But you know when you're ready to just sort of come back and really understand the religion. And I think I was coming up to that time quite recently, right? Like just through some life experiences, right? And one thing that religion has sort of taught me is just the biggest lesson, that we believe as Hindus is like just to be really humble and grateful for where you're at and just be a good human. Um, so I guess my question to you is: have you sort of delved into spirituality too much, or not particularly?
Um, yeah, good question. So,
And it doesn't have to be contrasted to religion. It can just be whatever sort of form you believe
yeah,
in.
or like what my belief
Yeah.
is. Yeah. So, I guess what I like about a lot of religions is they do have really good teachings. If you look at the, five pillars of Islam, or, the Jesus's teachings that he has, and what you were saying there, I'm not too familiar with
Yeah.
Hinduism, but
Yeah.
it sounds um kind of similar as well, where it's, be humble and grateful, and, not a cunt.
Yeah.
Um,
Pretty much. Yeah. That's
um,
that's right.
I've been reading like quite a few self-help books, and
Yeah.
one that comes up quite frequently is Buddhism as well, and just
Mm.
that teachings of just presence, but then also like the humility as well, and acceptance of what is, and yeah, just honoring the present moment over everything, and, not getting, I guess, too caught up and attached to things that don't really matter.
Mm. Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting.
so yeah, I really like those teachings. In terms of my beliefs, I think, like, I wouldn't say I'm a spiritual person or anything like
Mm.
that, but I think, and like what you're saying about being grateful and humble, I think we were having this chat the other day,
We
but
were,
there
yeah.
also has to be this kind of, obviously, have drive in life, and,
Mm.
set goals and try to, shoot for the moon, but you have to honor and accept where you are now. And I think we're having this chat the other day. About the study I read about in a book, where they started just getting people to write what was going on in their life, and then scoring their happiness out of 10. And they found very quickly that people were pretty boring, and they just said 7 all the time. Something great would happen: promotion, win the lottery, they might go up to an 8 or a 9, but after a while they'll go back to a 7. Same the other way. They could, lose a friend or go through a divorce, or become disabled in some way. They might go down to like a 2 or a 3 even, but then they would eventually come back up to a 7. So I think the point that came up from that study is, if your goal is to be 10 out of 10 happy all the time, you're going to be pretty miserable.
Mm.
But I think you have to be content
Yeah.
and aim to be a 7,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like, you
No.
don't have to be great all the time, but you just have to be okay and just be grateful that you are a 7.
Yeah. No, that's pretty deep, man. Yeah, and we did have this discussion couple of days ago, and I think that's probably one of the things that I struggle with, if I'm honest with myself. And we'll sort of touch on the next topic, which we did have a discussion on, but I'm always keen to get another view, which is the definition of success and what you think of that as well. But yeah, one of the things that I had an issue with was just as you said, like sort of striving for the moon all the time, and sometimes I'll be honest, like even getting to that point as well. But then I've noticed a lot of negative externalities come from that. Like I lost time away from friends, from family, because I just wanted to so called be on the grind all the time, right? And it definitely got to a point where like it's not sustainable for me. Like I'm like, what am I doing this for? Like, yes, I'm making a decent amount of money. Yes, like I can buy whatever I want or whatever it is. But at what expense am I doing it for? And I had that realization when I actually lost my job about 5 months ago at that startup company that I was telling you in cyber. Yeah, during those 3 or 4 months when I was there, as I said, it was really good in terms of what it looked like on the outside. But then when I lost that job, that hit me with a big realization of like, Rishi, this is sort of what happens, mate, when you want to go too far too quick. And I took that risk of going to a startup. Obviously, you risk job stability, but as opposed to you do get paid a lot more than what you normally would at, I guess, another place or whatever. And that was a really good experience in its way. But those 4 months where I was unemployed, that really sort of taught me that you just have to be grateful for what you have and just make sure that you do work hard and you do have your goals, but also be realistic with spending quality time with friends and family. So yeah, no, that's pretty interesting, man. And that study you shared as well was definitely very insightful.
Yeah, and it sounds like you learnt that you can grind and put so much effort into a job that might not even be there tomorrow, but you learnt that what's important is that your family is always going to be there. So don't neglect them for something that's not permanent or can be quite, like you said, or with jobs, I guess, volatile
Yeah,
or in like non-secure.
yeah. No,
Whereas
that's right.
obviously your family and your friends are always going to be there.
Yeah, that's right, man. And look, you touched on like the next sort of thing, which is, it's a bit closer to home, but like that sort of family. Like one thing that I've sort of done recently is like I've always had mum and dad around me. Like they've lived with
Mm.
me, throughout the years. Even at my place, they were living with me then, and now I'm back at their house now. But they've always like in our sort of culture, it's pretty common for like parents to be part of us even as we get older. Obviously, once we get married, we'll have that independence, but they'll always still have that element of being around us and just sort of we'll take care of them when they get older. And then and then because at the moment like they're putting in so much, at least for me, they're putting in so much effort, or like especially in our younger years to go to make us go to private schools, all this education and all this and that. So my question to you is like, are you pretty close with your family, and like have they sort of influenced you over time?
Yeah, I'm super close with my family, not just immediate family, but extended family
Yeah,
on both sides. And what I really love is how different they are. So my mum's side of the family is Italian, and they just sit around the table and just shout at each other and argue and yell. But that's just how
how
they,
it is. Yeah,
that's just a conversation. Like you
yeah,
don't get to say anything unless you barge into the conversation and cut someone off. That's just
yeah.
that's
That's
just
how
how
it
it
is.
is.
Yeah,
Where on my dad's side of the family, very calm and quiet, and sit around and have a discussion. One person talks at a time, and you don't. The next person won't start talking until they finish talking, and but I love them both just
yeah.
so much, and
It's good
like
to
you
hear.
said about your parents, um, putting so much work into you and caring for you. Like I
Yeah,
definitely felt that growing up, and I feel like you don't fully appreciate everything your parents do until you
mm,
kind of get into the real world.
mm.
Go, I can't even take care of myself at the moment. I couldn't imagine raising me.
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
Jesus Christ.
That's, yeah, dude, that's so true. And look, that's very good to hear, man, that you're super close with your family as well. And as you said, I think like as we get older, we realize that more because like 2 years ago or whatever, like I didn't appreciate all that. We were just doing nothing, doing whatever. But yeah, no, that's really good to hear, man. And I hope that wherever you go, whatever you do, you'll always have that element of being able to speak to your family, as you do, and also to your close mates as well, for sure. So yeah, like I think that's sort of what I wanted to come to, I guess, sort of concluding this episode. One thing I always do at the end with all the guests that I've had on was sort of, is there anything that you want to ask me, or like any sort of questions that you'd sort of want to raise before we sort of close this out?
Um, yeah, hang on. I'm thinking. Um, well, you say you ask everyone what success looks like
Mm.
to them. I kind of want to flip that, and I want to know what success looks like to you.
Okay.
Obviously, you have a great job and you
Yeah.
drive a Tesla and
Oh,
you own a house and you're
that's-
rolling in it. You know what I mean? Like, I'd say that's pretty successful. But as we've talked about, you've got a family that loves you as well, and you've learnt
yeah.
quite recently just
Yeah.
how much you appreciate them and how grateful you are to them, and also about you returning to your religion. So there's all these different, kind of thingos of success, all these items. But I want to know what success means to you.
Yeah, right. Firstly, that's a very detailed question. I thank you for asking that. I haven't had really anyone sort of ask me that sort of deep question, but I appreciate it. Look, I think there's a lot of elements to that. For me personally, as you rightly said, gone through the ups and lows of life. But to put simply, what I think success is for me at this point in life is just um, being content with where I'm at, which I am now for sure over these last year or so. Or sorry, probably 6 months or so. But in more specifically to that, I think what success means to me is just um, having good relationships with people, being happy with what you're doing at work, and also having a good balance of what you're doing as well. Like, do your work, but then also have time set aside to friends. Go to the gym. Have these times away where you just also in your own element. So, and then I also think success is, this is going to sound pretty spiritual as well, which Mum said this on when I had her on the podcast. But it's also finding what your true purpose is. And that's again, like, it's one of those sayings where it's pretty, it's a pretty, it's a buzzword or a buzz sentence if you want to call it. But I think because I'm going to go back to India in April next year, and one of the places I'm going to is a place called Rishikesh, ironically. And
Rishi Cash.
yeah, Rishikesh, and it's an area in India where essentially all the how to say, all the monks, or like the spiritual people, that's where they live essentially, and they practice meditation, and everyone's welcome. So people from South America go to that spot because they really want to learn more about Hinduism, or they just want to learn more about spirituality. People from around the world come for like a month. And then she was going through that experience, and she's like, that experience like changed her life completely. Like, the course she did was essentially a yoga course, and essentially it was over 30 days, and you do these different classes, right? Um, and then you go to see these different, they call them gurus, which is like
Mm.
spiritual leaders in a way, and they literally will just tell you like everything about like what you've done in the past, like where you're going, just based off how you're conversing with them. I know when I'm saying that to you, you probably don't believe me, which is very fair. I didn't believe mum as well, but that's one of those experiences that I really want to do, to just really truly find like what it is that I actually like, what it is that I sort of came here to do. And I think that's something that I'm still trying to figure out myself, just trying to find out what I really want to do, and like where I'm at, and what contributions I can give to society. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. And that, I don't know what the term is. It's not a. It sounds a bit like one of those kind of silent retreats, but on
Yeah,
absolute steroids.
yeah,
30 days of no distractions, no you know nothing else in the world. Like, it's just you, and you have the time to just sit and discuss
yeah,
with obviously gurus who I imagine are extremely knowledgeable
yeah,
and intelligent
yeah,
and grounded people,
yeah,
who obviously know how to, I guess, assess people on a spiritual level, and make determinations from there. But that sounds like an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, and whether or not I believe it, I believe that you would come away from there knowing a lot more about yourself than if you didn't go.
100%.
I don't think there's any bad that could come from doing something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
for
it's not like
sure.
the gurus are going to be like, oh, well, everyone, who comes through, we give them a purpose, but not you.
Yeah. Yeah. No. No. No, it's nothing like that. And to be fair, like I don't think I'll do what Mum did because that's one of those experiences where I, like she told me that's one of those experiences where like you'll know in your heart when you need to go, and like everyone that was doing that, they were just eyeballing tears because like the stuff that the gurus were saying about them were just like so true and like so accurate that they just couldn't like it's an emotional journey. That's what I like try to say. Like I'd go there just to see the environment and just to see how things are. But I wouldn't go on that specific, that yoga course as well. Maybe later on, like once I've seen the area and stuff, I'll definitely do it. But yeah, I think it'll be a great experience either way, dude, for sure. Alrighty, well, that brings up to the conclusion of this episode. Want to thank once again Tom for being on the podcast. Real Talks with Rish and Eric for letting us use his crib. Much appreciated, mate. We talked on a couple of things here, so we delved a lot on spirituality, a little bit more so on Tom's experiences. Traveling outside of Australia and what a gap year really taught him about himself and what he really wanted to do in his career and in his work. We also talked about relationships and how important they are for Tom and myself as well. And then, we sort of topped it off with a bit of spirituality talks and just being content with where we are. So, yeah, thank you guys once for tuning in. And yeah, that's a wrap on Real Talks with Rish.
Thanks for having me, Rish.